Folks, I don't know if you've heard of this term banking as a service, but if you haven't, you probably will soon. Is it right for you? Is it a good thing to do? Are there risks? Well, you know what? Dana from Himlane has had the team look into it, and it may not be all roses and sunshine. So let's dig in. Dana, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on this morning.
Absolutely. So you and I have been working in an industry called software as a service for a long time. Now with all these other technologies and apps, they're moving into banking as a service. So why don't we first start with a general definition, and then we'll dig into if it's right, wrong, indifferent, risky. We'll go from there.
Great. So, banking as a service is a model where tech companies, including property management softwares like ourselves, use an API to embed banking services directly into their platforms. And this allows them to sidestep the need for a banking license because they're working with a bank. And it's interesting. It's a one-stop shop experience, which I'm actually a huge fan of. I think when you're a landlord, you have enough to worry about.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to 10 different platforms to operate your business. Like don't get me wrong, I very much promote all in one, but within reason and understanding what should be all in one and what is better left to other banks. And so such examples of that would be, hey, you don't have to open a bank account with Bank of America or Wells Fargo. You open up the bank account on Hemlane. Let's just say Hemlane had banking as a service, which we decided not to move forward with.
Which you do not have, but this is an example.
Yes, exactly. You would be able to go in there and open up a bank account, and then even open, so you could have a checking, and then you could also have an interest-bearing account, which has been a very hot topic with obviously interest rates going up and being able to earn about 5% off that. You think, hey, I've got a lot of rent just sitting in a bank account. Maybe I should earn interest. Yeah. So that is essentially what banking as a service is. And there was a couple years ago, there was this wave of what I would call digital disruption to make it easier. And a couple of players went into this space. So an example is unit.co. You can go to their website, unit.co. Treasury Prime is another one. And essentially what they said is property management software or fintech company, whoever you are, go ahead and just use this API. And it's super easy. It's like a document, right, that you give to the engineers. And you say, here is the API implementation. And now suddenly you can offer your customers access to banking services. Yep. So what is in it for the platform? Like, what would be in it for Hemlane? Well, what would be in it is actually additional revenue. So when you think about as a software platform, could you make more money off this? Yes, because these banking as a service providers through the bank will give you some kind of certain activities that are done in order to get access to your audience. So in order to get access to all of the users on the platform. And then what makes it easy is that, the platform doesn't have to become a bank, doesn't have to go through the licensing and all of the security. It's just through an API. Okay, so Michael, guess which banks sync up with Unit and Treasury Prime and all of these? Which banks are signing up out the door for this?
Oh, I'm going to guess the big banks.
It's actually the opposite. It's the tiny little banks.
Damn it.
So the major banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America won't integrate with these tech platforms. They're like, no, we've got brand recognition. We've got all this awareness. You yourself want to open a Wells Fargo account and get our interest rates, even our mortgages, anything, you go through the Wells Fargo platform. So they've stayed very closed. So what happens is the smaller banks, they see this as a growth and revenue opportunity. And so they say, great, we don't actually need physical branches. I'm a small credit union in Montana.
Of
Let
course.
me go ahead and I'll connect with these APIs through this banking as a service platforms. And then I'm going to be able to have exposure to more people who may not live in Montana where my bank is. And now I don't need to have physical branches. And then for them, they say, hey, this is how we can compete with the large banks. And what's interesting is from a regulatory perspective, I think a lot of people don't know this, but smaller banks actually have more flexibility in tailoring compliance than the larger ones.
Yep.
And so I want to take you, Michael, back to one of our most popular conversations, which was Silicon Valley Bank and the collapse of that. What do you think could go wrong? And why did our product team kind of blow the whistle on like, hey, your property management software probably shouldn't be your bank?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. I was trying to look it up for there was a small bank that failed recently. Actually, it wasn't a bank. That's the key. They position themselves as banks, but they're not banks. They're intermediaries. And then some API or something got shut down, and all their customers' money's frozen or lost. They don't know what's going on. That happened in the last year or so. But back to your question about Silicon Valley Bank, what we learned in that environment is money can leave the bank very quickly, right? We have never seen a digital bank run. And, that's what killed Silicon Valley Bank was the digital bank run.
Yep. Yeah. So we learned that. And just also, you need to be aware of who your banking partner is with that,
Yes.
right? So
The
you
real
need to
banking
know
partner. Yes.
who their banking partner is. And then on top of that, to your point, do they have the right processes and procedures in place to avoid that? And I think we could go into a whole other discussion of whether or not this was avoidable with Silicon Valley Bank. I think diversification, all sorts of other hot topics we could talk about could be part of it. But there's basically risks with using banks like this, right? First, you get limited customer support. So it's not like Wells Fargo and Bank of America that have a really strong process for customer support. There's obviously data privacy and security concerns with all these different intermediaries. I almost think the more people you get involved, the more things that can go wrong. And then there's actually, if you look at them, higher fees with lower interest rate overall, because there's so many people taking a cut of the pie for you as a user, because the software platform is getting a fee. There's the API, and then there's the small bank that all need to make money through this process. And so I think with it, kind of this disruption in funds is a really important one, because Michael, we brought this up of, what I learned from Silicon Valley Bank is don't put all my eggs in one basket and know what that basket is.
Good job. Good job.
Put money in multiple different places. And so I think that it's really important if you are a landlord and you are looking at, what am I going to do for banks, and how am I going to earn interest off this rent that I have collected in the account, etc. I think you really need to understand who you're working with. And is this the best partner for you? And what potentially are those risks? Because my strong opinion in doing the research and having, it was our product team that shared it with me, is that a property management software should not be a bank. Yes. We can do transfers of funds for you. In other words, from the tenant's bank account, no matter what bank account it is, we can do that transfer over to you. We can go ahead and send it the other way so that security deposit goes back. We will use the best in class practices to do it. But I think banking as a service, and if you're advertised, hey, you get these interest rates in this savings account, the real question is, well, what bank's behind it? Who are they using through an API and all of that?
Well, here's the example. I finally found it. So this was a big news in June of 2024. Yada Bank.
Never heard of it.
First off, Yada Bank is not a bank.
Okay.
Their name. They were a fintech company, and they positioned themselves as being FDI insured. They were not. They were leveraging a
Wow.
bank called Evolve Bank and Trust. Again, a small bank.
Yep.
And basically what happened is sometime in 2024, there was an API, again, from the fintech to the actual bank that
Yep.
they took that, I don't know, was shut down, takedown. I'm not intimately involved, but I remember the story. And people who thought they were invested in a bank, i.e. Yada Bank, all their money's frozen. FDIC's like, hey, not my problem, right? You're not a
Yep.
bank. You don't have a bank charter. And near as I can tell, it's still going on. There's people that don't have access to their money. It's gone. It's vaporized. And I think this is an exact example. Somebody used, again, my knowledge of the situation. Yada Bank tried to be banking as a service, relied on apparently Revolve Bank and Trust, which, is not one of the big eight banks.
Yep.
And that relationship fell apart. And the customers who thought they were in a bank weren't in a bank, and now they're out of luck.
Yeah, it's so sad. The same thing happened to EU rent payment, which held landlords' funds as well a while ago, and it's so sad to see that. And that's why I always think the question is why? Who are you using? What's behind this? Because I think sometimes when things are too easy with the click of the button, that everything's all in one and we can do everything. The question is it right for you? And that is really something that every landlord should be asking.
You've got to, if you're putting your money somewhere, and again, it's money, like if you're collecting rent, that's used for operational expenses, right? This is not investment money. This is not, hey, I'm going to buy and hold. This is like, I use this to run my business. You better make sure that thing's in a bank, right? Not something pretending to be a bank.
Exactly.
You got to make sure you've got FDI insurance, not some, I don't know, whatever they were positioning. I don't know the story, but it is certainly very sad. So yeah, I think banking as a service is another one of those things that gets pitched because it sounds cool. It's one of those gray areas.
Yeah.
And then it's just not legit. It's not legit.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. I hope that in a couple years from now that will come out and it will stop being promoted. But we see it too often where someone's like, comes to us and is like, hey, why don't you guys offer bank accounts for us? This other platform does. And it was like, well, if we thought that was a good idea for our customers, we would have done that, right? We would. And so I do think just making sure, I tend to be much more conservative from that perspective with
good job.
Banking partners. There was a reason we use Stripe. There's folks who will say, hey, we can get you the funds immediately, like an ACH transfer. We can get you the funds immediately. That is a risk. No one knows that company is floating the funds. So if there is fraud, everyone's assets could be wiped or their transfers could be wiped out. And so we just try to make sure we say this is the best and safest way for all of our users to experience rentals and getting money from one party to the other.
Folks, at the end of the day, Dana and the Hemlane team, frankly, could be making more money and more profit if they sold this, pixie dust and rainbows. It's not legit. It's too risky. It's not something she would do, and thus the product doesn't do. So banking as a service done by a lot of pretenders might open you up for risk and loss of funds. See Yada Bank for an example. Dana, where can people find out more about Hemlane?
Yeah, if you're interested in rent collection and doing it securely or tracking your financials, which we do sync to other bank accounts, it's hemlane.com and mention one rental at a time for 20% off your first year. And we do offer free accounting services. So you can sync your Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan, any sort of account with us, and then you can record your transactions. But again, we're not the bank. We're just helping you analyze your cash flow.
Facilitating reports on the data.
Exactly. That is correct.
Folks, go to hemlane.com, get a trial, go to their resources tab, use the free version, do some advertising. It's all there for you. Thanks, Dana.
Thanks so much, Michael.